Hey, you guys, welcome to True Set Free. This is Pastor Steve Whinery. If you guys have questions, email me, crosswalkradio@gmail.com. Leave me a text or voicemail, 707-872-7677. If you're listening on the radio, welcome. So glad that you're tuning in. If you're on social media, YouTube or Facebook, just post your comments if you're watching live, and we'll try and get to them. If you're not watching live, don't post your comments on there. Just waiting for Steve to get his phone to...
I'm live.
Okay, I do have some announcements for you. The first one is for our normal Sunday church. We will be outside. What this means is we have 3 services. Our 7:30 is inside the sanctuary. Our 9:15 and 11, second and third service, is outside in the amphitheater. The weather is super nice. Last week was really good. So if you're wondering, that's our schedule for now. We are also starting this Sunday night at 6:30 p.m., which is our normally our Sunday night Bible study. We're going to, the first Sunday of every month, do a worship night. So this is going to consist of worship, that's in the title, but just a time to come together as a body of Christ, worship the Lord. I haven't actually talked to the guys, but I'm assuming maybe they'll do some like afterglow type stuff, or
I'll probably do communion and stuff.
Yeah, so it's going to be that vibe, and for however long, but just plan on first Sunday of the month at 6:30. That's what we're going to do. I have to tell you something else. Nope, that was the worship night. Do you have anything for these guys?
Nope.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So first thing out of the gate is apparently we've made it big. We've finally got censored on YouTube. They took our video down. I was excited. The secretaries or Christy was like, "This is so messed up." I think it's how we titled it. For you guys that are asking, what we do is we'll take questions from True Set Free, and we'll just post them on YouTube one at a time because of search content, but also it's a lot easier for people to watch a 5 or 10 minute clip than a whole hour show. So that's what we try and help you out on social media. If you wanted to listen to that and you didn't get to because they took it down, just go to our show on Facebook, the whole live show, and it's in there. So you guys can still watch it. It's just not cut up for you nice on the 5 minute clip. So find it on our feed, and if you wanted to listen to it, you can do that. All right, my first...
But now Facebook knows.
I know, I just told them so.
You just told them.
But they're going to have to watch this whole video.
You Facebook censors, you need to repent, man.
Yeah.
You need to give your life to Jesus, because you got a messed up life and you got a messed up head too.
Now they're really bad. Yeah. Okay. I think that's everything. Let's jump into some questions here. Okay. This first one, I'm going to read it. It says this: I want to practice being able to present the gospel using only the Old Testament, but so far I'm pretty unfamiliar with how to do that effectively and what passages to use. Could you give me a bit of a guide or outline on how you might do that?
When I look at this, I could go through and give you a bunch of verses, and different chapters and stuff like that. Let me give you something that's a little bit simpler so everybody can take off with it. Number 1, the book of Hebrews. Book of Hebrews is a defense of the fact that Jesus is greater than the angels, than Abraham, than the Levitical priesthood, than the sacrifices, all of that kind of stuff. And what Paul, who most likely is the writer of Hebrews, does is he goes through and he quotes the Old Testament extensively. And so going through and studying the book of Hebrews is going to give you a good outline on how to deal with all those different issues. And he takes you back to verses in the Old Testament that are talking about Jesus. So that's an automatic kind of cheat sheet on that whole idea. The other thing that I would point you to is Isaiah chapter 53. Actually, you start in chapter 52, but chapter 53 is the main one. And just go through and do a study on that. I've used that witnessing with people. I typed out that chapter of Isaiah on a sheet of paper. Back this was back years ago, and when I would go out and excuse me, talk to people, and I'd be witnessing to them, I would on purpose, just give them the sheet of paper and have them go through and read that chapter. You don't even have to do the whole chapter, but just go through and read major portions of that chapter and ask them who it's talking about. And then they obviously say that's talking about Jesus. And then I ask them when they think, what part of the Bible they think it's in. And usually, because they're not familiar with the Bible, they'll go, that's got to be the New Testament, because that's about Jesus. And then I tell them, no, that's out of the Old Testament, and all that stuff was written 750 years before the events. And then they're pretty much blown away. And so that's a really good way to share the gospel, because it's all right there in Isaiah chapter 53. Other chapters that you can go to, Genesis chapter 22 is a story of Abraham and his son Isaac being offered up as a sacrifice. And it's a picture of the sacrifice of Jesus. It, by the way, is the first place in the Bible where love is mentioned. And God says to Abraham, take your son, your only son, whom you love, and offer him as a sacrifice. And that's a key into the fact that that's going to be something that's speaking about the coming of Christ and his sacrifice that was made for us. And so a study on Genesis chapter 22, also a study on Psalm 22. Psalm 22 is the crucifixion from the point of view of Jesus, on the cross. And so do a study on that, and those will be really good to get you going.
So my first understanding that this is one book, and I still remember it was actually Missler, but his key thing of his ministry, or one of his phrases, was 66 books written by over 40 different authors. I still remember it. It's an integrated message system, that transcends time and stuff. And really, if you're looking at just the things that Jesus said, he is saying things expecting you to know a baseline of the Old Testament to understand what he's saying.
Right.
And then if you don't have that baseline, when you go to Hebrews, when you go to Revelation, when you go to those other verses, you're like, this is some abstract, word picture, whatever, but it's not. It's actually, tied to things in the Old Testament that we're supposed to know.
It's quotes from the Old Testament, or it's allusions to the Old Testament, or,
So one book, and this is something that I think nowadays in the church, Christians forget. In fact, you even have these pastors that are like, oh, well, we should only teach out of the New Testament because, we're New Testament believers and we want to reach people in a modern way. They don't understand that this is one book. You're really cutting out most of the New Testament by not teaching the Old Testament.
Exactly. Some of the most radical prophecies that you have in the Bible are in the Old Testament, and they're about Jesus. And so, like I said, Isaiah 53 is one of those. But you have passages in the Old Testament that are speaking about our times. And so, you ditch the Old Testament, you're ditching 3/4 of the Bible.
Yeah.
Basically. And that's silly. Yeah. And the idea that the Old Testament is outdated and the New Testament is new. The New Testament's 2,000 years old, and the Old Testament is, it's only 3,500 years, total.
Yeah, and, our God doesn't change, right? So if he said it in the Old Testament, it's not like he changed his mind. We got to figure out what changed or how to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, and if you can't figure out Old Testament stuff and you've got issues with that, you're going to have issues with the book of Revelation, because in the book of Revelation, Jesus is an Old Testament guy, because grace has been given and grace has been rejected. Yeah. And now it's judgment.
Yeah.
That's the stories that you have in the Old Testament. Grace was given, grace was rejected, and then judgment came. The
description of Christ in the book of Revelation is one of the scariest pictures that I think you have in Scripture, of him returning, just eyes flame of fire, like he's ready to judge. So.
Yeah, there were times when my mom was really mad at me. Her eyes would get big. I could see all the, the whites around her eyes. Flame of fire. That's what I always think about when that's happening. I don't know why my mom would get mad at me, because I was
perfect in every way. Yeah. Practically perfect in every way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was adorable.
I threw this one in there because I've talked to probably half a dozen people this week who've asked me the same question, but It says, do we say anything to the people who are ruining the religious exemption? And so the question goes like this is, with a religious exemption, all of a sudden you have this onslaught of people who are just sincere about their faith, and now it's like, oh yeah, I want a religious exemption, and Christians are like, how do we deal with that? Because they for sure never said anything, didn't go to church, didn't know the Lord in that way before, but now they're, born again, so to speak. Do we let it go? Do we say anything? Is it none of our business? Is it part of just
You
being
walk
an
up
American?
to them, and you take their religious exemption, and you tear it up and say, "You hypocrite!
Yeah,
you whitewashed wall!
Anathema.
Anathema to you!" No, you know what?
This video is for sure getting banned. The last one was just a start. We're going downhill.
I use that stuff as an opportunity to witness to guys, and so all of a sudden, they got religion. And that's exactly what they've got, because you got to have a real relationship with Christ, not just a religion. And so if they don't have the relationship before that point, and they just they're using Jesus as an excuse for that kind of thing, then I would use it as an opportunity to just talk to them. Had some buddies of mine that I worked with, and this is an old story that I've told, but I had some buddies of mine that I worked with, and let them just doing my thing, taking my Bible to work, and I worked in construction, and didn't talk with them a whole lot, and until they started asking questions. I'm witnessing to them. A month after I started working with these guys, they both come up to me. They'd been living with their girlfriends. They both come up to me on the same day and say, "Hey, we're getting married."
Really?
And I was like, "Wow, that's great! Congratulations!" And then I said, "You're not doing that, so." Because you think that it's going to make you okay with God, are you? And then they got really quiet and they didn't say anything. And I said, because that's not what makes you okay with God. And then started talking to them again about having a real relationship with Jesus, and didn't dismiss that at all. I said, I think that's a great thing. And I think your girlfriends probably think it's an awesome thing that you're doing that, but that's not what's going to get you to heaven. And just did that. So if I had a guy on my crew or at my work that was all of a sudden going and getting a religious exemption, I wouldn't be picking on him about it. I'd just go up to him and say, "Hey, so you're a believer," and then start into a conversation with them. How's it going? How's your walk with God? That kind of thing. You're going to find out pretty quick what's going on, and that kind of thing. When I was a young Christian, I was in a period of time where I was having a really hard time with my walk. And one of my buddies at the job I was at came up to me and said, "Steve, I need to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay." And he starts talking to me and telling me that he got saved that weekend. That he gave his life to Jesus. And then he starts telling me about Jesus and stuff. And I said, "Well, I'm a Christian." And he goes, "You are?" And I said, "Yeah," like that. And then he goes, "Well, what church you go to?" And I go, "Well, I go to Calvary Chapel." And he goes, "That's a church I got saved at. You go to Calvary Chapel?" And he just that kind of attitude totally convicted me, and it was a beginning of a great relationship.
Yeah.
Turning things around in my life.
All right, good stuff.
Yeah.
Parenting question. How much privacy seems appropriate to give kids from their siblings?
I don't really have a Bible passage for that I can think of. If you're asking me my opinion on that, it depends on what kind of privacy you can give and what's reasonable. I grew up in a house where I had a brother and two sisters, and never had my own room. And so I grew up that, the whole time that way. When I was in high school, my last 2 years in high school, I slept on the couch in the living room. And so I guess that was my own room, and that kind of thing. And so my sisters slept together, sometimes in the same bed, sometimes separate beds, depending on what we had. And my brother and I had separate beds. And we just did it that way. As far as privacy goes, I would make sure that my sons and my daughters were separate as far as taking showers and baths and that kind of thing when it becomes age appropriate. There was quite a while that my little ones ran around naked in my house, just laughing and screaming. So, but there comes a point where that needs to stop. But I don't know, age appropriate. You don't want them in the same bathroom with each other, taking showers and baths and that kind of stuff. Anything, you just got to know that Satan is going to use anything that he can to wreck a kid. And so just be aware of it. Just be ahead of the game. And I don't think that you need to be freaked out by that kind of stuff. But just watching out for the kids, especially the girls.
Yeah. So with technology, I'll ask you this. You have like cameras, baby monitors that have cameras. You have like my little one. My wife put a alarm doorbell thing on her door, so if she wakes up in the middle of the night, it goes off and she's not wandering the house. Or actually, it started with my son who was a sleepwalker, and so the door would open and it would ding a doorbell or whatever. So age appropriate. The world we live in, you have Christian parents, including me and my wife, who really want to protect our kids from the world. Obviously, we want to train them to do battle in the world, so we don't just shelter them, but we want to keep them from junk. How much of that stuff, is overboard versus okay? Is it an age appropriate timeline thing? What?
Well, I think it depends on it depends on everything. So, size of your house. So, when my kids were younger, I had basically a 2-bedroom house. We've since done a remodel on it, and so we have a master bedroom suite and that kind of thing. And so it would be different. The door to my room was open, the door to the kids' room was open. And so I sleep pretty light, and my wife for sure sleeps light. And so, we didn't have to worry about it that much. That was back in the days of audio baby monitors. And so we had that stuff, and that kind of thing. When I moved, when we got the bedroom suite, the master bedroom suite, if I was in the situation now, then I might put up a baby, a baby monitor with a video and that kind of stuff. If my kids were smaller and they're down a ways from me, and I would just do whatever is appropriate. I think that sometimes people people freak out about things, and it's because of the world that we live in. Lock the doors. Make sure that your kids are safe and let them be children. But on the other hand, again, I just stay ahead of the whole thing. As far as internet access, there's programs that little kids don't need to have cell phones. Obviously, my kids didn't get cell phones until they were in high school, and then it was they didn't take them to school with them, and that kind of stuff. So we were pretty on the cell phone stuff, and the same thing with internet access. If I had a kid today, my kids are grown and out of the house, but if I had a kid today, I would be doing programs that let me know where they're going and what's happening and blocks and that kind of stuff. And I'd be on top of that because, they could be smarter than you as far as computer stuff goes. And I never want my kid to be smarter than me. I always want to be ahead of them. And, I used to be a kid. I still remember being a kid. And, I've got a good memory that way. And so in most instances, I was ahead of them. There were times when I knew that they were getting into something that they shouldn't be getting into, and blocked, just short-circuited that whole thing. There were other times when they got older and I knew that they were getting into things that they shouldn't be getting into, and I waited till they got into it, and then I talked to them after the fact. And, it was just a back and forth thing, trying to get them to make right choices and that kind of stuff, reap consequences and those kinds of things. So with little kids, it's one issue. With older kids, it's another one.
So if I had to summarize what you just said, awareness.
Yeah.
Before I was a Christian in high school, I remember me and my friends went over to this gal's house. I didn't know her. My friends knew her. Like you said, the size of your house, she had like a 3-level house. Parents slept upstairs or second floor, whatever. It's like 12 o'clock at night. We walk in through the bottom basement and we're all just hanging out and the parents have no idea.
Right.
I'm in high school. I'm a dumb kid. And I'm thinking, if this is my daughter and I come downstairs, well, first of all, you're not coming to my house without knowing. Because I got dogs and cameras and guns and warning systems, and it's a compound with No, I'm just kidding.
The guns are pointed at the door with a little string on the trigger.
You will trip the laser. But I'm thinking, man, if I come downstairs as a dad and these people are in my house, and so it comes down to just being aware of what's going on with your kids.
Yeah. And your kids are sinners, and you need to remember it.
Yeah.
And so, they're not golden. And so I love my kids, but they're little sinners. So.
All right. Good on that?
Yep.
Oops.
I hope so. I hope that helped.
Okay. It says this. Does God hold us accountable for things like abortion or other atrocities if we sit back and do nothing but talk about it? From a Christian philosophy point of view, when we are as believers required to take physical action against sin, or are we supposed to let the Lord handle it all? ? Same question goes for genocide or war type events where innocent people are being killed.
I think that's a personal thing in the sense that when you go through the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, you have all kinds of awful things that are going on in the culture. And you don't have people going out and just going after, every awful thing that was going on in the culture. And but there were times when God had had enough, and He would send a prophet and or a judge or that kind of thing, and they would go and take care of issues. Most often that was happening when the whole nation of Israel was under bondage to a foreign power. And so God would allow the foreign power to come in and take over, and there would be all kinds of atrocities, and God would raise somebody up to free the people. And so you see that a lot in the book of Judges. It was just a mess, basically. And so when I look at that stuff, I think that we live in a world that is pagan, and getting more pagan as time goes on. I think that Christians need to be aware of what's going on around them and be a light to the world. I think that, as far as the abortion issue goes, I would rather reach a girl who is going to get the abortion than try to blow up an abortion clinic. We need to change hearts. The reason that there are abortion clinics is because there are people who want to get abortions, and they, sometimes they don't know what an abortion consists of, and that's just giving somebody information. And a lot of this stuff needs to be happening on a personal one-on-one basis. I don't know a lot of girls who walk in and get an abortion who don't have somebody in their life who's a Christian somewhere. And I think that if the church is doing its job as far as being salt and light, that you can reach a person in that situation a whole lot better than just going out and trying to get rid of the places where abortions are being performed. Now, having said that, I don't, it's like every time I go by the abortion clinic, I kind of throw a spiritual bomb at it. I drive by that place all the time, and I'm praying for the people in it and praying for God to take it away. Same thing, we had a strip club down on the way to my house, and it's the only one in town, and it's on the way to my house. It was irritating. And so I would go by and pray for that place and ask God to just take it out and that kind of stuff. And when COVID hit, they went out of business. And so I'm the reason that COVID hit the United States. but the strip club's gone, so that's cool. In any case, I'll do that kind of stuff. And so people who picket at abortion clinics, I think that's a valid type of thing. But again, we're representatives of Christ, and we need to. One of the things that people have a tendency to point out, and say, and I've even used this before, is that you can't legislate righteousness, and that's absolutely true, with a caveat that you have to legislate a deterrent to evil. And that's what governments are for. And so I don't want to completely depend on the government and laws to get rid of these things. On the other hand, I don't want to ignore that. I think that if you had a nation that was full of people who actually followed Jesus and did what the Bible said, we wouldn't have to worry about abortion. And that's what it really gets down to. And so I want to be light and life to the people who are around me, and be reaching people that way, and at the same time be somebody who vocally has an issue with abortion. And I think that that's something that needs to be paid attention to in a number of different arenas. So, yeah.
All right, this is kind of coming out from left field, but we have a few minutes, so I'm going to ask you. We know the end of the book, right? We know we're going to a tyrannical one world government where they're going to control what you do, what buy and sell, and all that stuff. You see what's going on in the world right now. This is seems to be a precursor with the COVID thing, with Australia on lockdown where they can't leave the country. Some cities are hour out of your home a day, 9 to 5 lockdown, can only go to the grocery store. Stuff we've just never seen, at least in my lifetime. Maybe World War II type stuff, but never in my lifetime. When it comes to this issue as Christians, do you think that we're just going to transition into this Antichrist ran tyrannical one world government, or do you think that there's going to be more little skirmishes and wars to go through that process? And the reason I ask that is because up until 2020, everyone was like, oh, they won't do that. It's going to be a civil war in America. And I'm looking at the point we are now, and I don't mean nobody and nobody at all, but there's no civil war. There's no people in the street with, AR-15s saying, we own this town, don't step in. Do you think, to sum it up, that there will be that stuff until they overtake it, or we're just going to slide in with no resistance?
Well, when I go through and look at my Bible, Jesus talked about the fact that there would be wars and rumors of wars and famines and pestilences and plagues in various places. Mm-hmm. And so COVID's not even a plague. I know. And we got this. When you got a 99% survival rate, that's not a plague. Yeah. And we got this. We got what we've got here. The plagues haven't come yet. And so I think that what politicians do, and especially politicians on the left, Democrats specifically, I'm not giving these people cover anymore. I'm not going to be nice to them. What they do is they use anything that they can to get more power. Mm-hmm. And so, if it's global warming, they'll use that to get more power. If it's COVID, they'll use that to get more power. When we have these wars and rumors of wars that come along, they're going to use that to get more power. And plagues, famines and pestilences, obviously, people who want to run your life take any problem that there is and make it something that you should be absolutely afraid of, and let you know that they're the only one who can fix it. Mm-hmm. And that's what we see going on in our political system.
And they're doing it because they love you and for your benefit.
Yeah, and you need to be safe. And so the best way to have people give up their freedoms is to trade their freedoms for safety and security. Mm-hmm. And so, cradle to a grave, we'll pay you, we'll take care of you, we'll watch out for you, and we'll make sure that you don't die. And until it's time for you to die, and then we'll decide that too. And so that's what tyrants do. And so we have people, we have the worst people on the planet in government. as far as I can see. And again, not every single one of them. Some of them are decent people, but the vast majority of these people are just egotistical and ridiculous. And so we're getting what we vote for, basically in the United States. And so you voted for this stuff, and that's what you want, and you got it. Here it is. And so I think that there's a whole issue that's going on with that, and that's not even the big stuff. And so World War III is going to happen at the point that the tribulation starts.
Yeah.
It's going to be World War III, is what the Bible indicates. A quarter of the population is going to be destroyed. A quarter of the people on the earth are going to be killed at the beginning of the tribulation. And so again, we're sitting here looking at COVID, 99% survival rate, and World War III is going to be a 75% survival rate, depending on the nation you're in. And so 1/4 of the people on the planet are going to be killed. Imagine what politicians are going to do with that. And the indication in Scripture is that's how the Antichrist rises to power, out of that whole thing. He's somebody who fits the modern example of what a political operative is to a T. Just manipulative and somebody who uses any situation he can to get power over the people who are around him. And so what you see going on right now is going to be exacerbated over time by other things that Jesus said are coming. And so, like you said, we've got this thing going on, and there's no people in the streets saying, no, we're not going to do lockdowns and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe it's because they're all working. But, well, I don't know. Or it's because of apathy. And, but again, this is where it's going to go. And if you have most of the people who won't do anything and a small percentage of the people who want to go in a certain direction, then you're going to go with a small percentage of people. That's how revolutions happen. Revolutions don't usually happen with the majority of the populace once a government out. Usually it's some small group of people, and the rest of the population just goes along with it. And that's how you get communism. That's how you get totalitarian states and that kind of stuff. So I think it's a combination.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's going to get more gnarly as time goes on.
Be ready. Buckle up, folks. All right, where am I at here? In the judgment against Pharaoh, the 5th plague was against livestock, including horses, and they died. Where did Pharaoh get the horses for his chariots to pursue Israel into the Red Sea? And also, what was the time period over which these plagues occurred?
Okay. First question. 5th plague is in Exodus chapter 9. And it says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Go into Pharaoh and tell him, Thus says the Lord God of the Hebrews, Let my people go that they may serve me. If you refuse to let them go and still hold them, behold, the hand of the Lord will be on your cattle in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the oxen, and on the sheep, a very severe pestilence. And so when you get down to verse 6, it says, So the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of Egypt died, but of the livestock of the children of Israel, not one died. A couple of things in that passage. One of them is that the plague was not on all the livestock in general. It was specifically on all the livestock in the field. And so it looks like God did something with the cattle in the field, the horses in the field, the sheep in the field, is what the passage talks about. And so that would mean that cattle and horses and sheep that were in pens may have been excluded from that whole thing. The other thing is the word all in verse 6. That's a word in Hebrew that can mean basically all sorts, or from all over, or it's been or all over the place. That's Hebrew, and the Hebrew language is kind of more general than, for example, Greek, or even sometimes with English. And so obviously not all the livestock died. And so those are the two answers to that question. When he says all the livestock of Egypt died, he would be talking about all the livestock in the field, not every animal, obviously, because, like you said, later on there's horses pulling chariots. So,
Okay.
yeah.
There you go. All right.
Oh, the second part of the question: how long were the plagues? I don't know. There's not really a way to calculate these things. You can go through and get a general idea. So, for example, the plague on the River Nile lasted for 7 days. Plague of frog lasted, was that? Well, it would have to go a couple of days. Plague of lice was 3 days. The darkness was 3 days. And so you can go through and you can kind of catalog all these things and give some time in between. And it was probably a couple of months. I just not too long ago did a study through the book of Exodus, and you can get it done in 50 days if it's pretty much one thing after another after another after another. It could be up. I would say at least a couple of months to do all these things, but you don't have a specific timeline.
Okay. Whoops. Continuing, I guess it's going to be an end times theme, True Set Free. But it says, if I understand it correctly, the Lord will save Israel in the Ezekiel 38-39 war. His purpose being to show that he is the Lord. If this event is to convince them and the world of who he is, then I would think that the timing of this event would fit better at mid-trib rather than at the beginning. If it happens at the beginning of the tribulation, how is Israel fooled by the Antichrist? Please explain.
Okay. Well, first off, mid-trib, if you're talking about the midpoint in the tribulation, it's 3.5 years in. And one of the things that you have, one of the places where we get basically the calendar for the tribulation period is in Daniel chapter 9. And so in Daniel chapter 9, it divides the 70th week, and basically that's a period of time, a 7-year period of time that's prophesied for the nation of Israel. It takes that period of time, that 7-year period, and divides it up into 2 parts. And the midpoint of those 2 parts, 3.5 years into that, is the point where the offering and the sacrifice are taken away, and the abomination which makes desolate is performed. And so that Jesus calls that the abomination of desolation. And that's at the midpoint of the tribulation period. Okay. So the Antichrist reveals himself to be the Antichrist at the midpoint of the tribulation period. And so there's when you're talking about the timing for all this stuff, it's at that point that you start seeing the major judgments from God, specifically from God, coming down on the planet. Not that the previous judgments weren't, but in the previous judgments, they're more naturalistic, in the sense that it's a war and a quarter of the Earth's population dies, and it's looks like an asteroid or a comet impact, and a large portion of the Earth is burned and the sea is destroyed and that kind of stuff. You have these things that are going on that look like they are beginning at the very beginning of the tribulation period, and that period of time all culminates with this situation with the Antichrist revealing himself. And so up until that point, the Antichrist is going to be deceiving people, right? And so he rises through a war, specifically. In Revelation chapter 6, in verse 1, it talks about a guy riding on a white horse, carrying a bow, and has a crown on his head. And he goes out conquering and to conquer. And it's in that battle that a quarter of the earth is destroyed. Okay, so that's the beginning of the tribulation period. That looks like the Ezekiel 38-39 battle at that point. That would be basically what we would call World War III, unless there's something in between now and in that battle. And so it looks to me like that's the beginning. The one of the things that's telling about the Ezekiel battle is that when you get to chapter 39, it talks about the fact in chapter 39, verse 9, that they're using the weapons that come from that battle as fuel for 7 years. And 7 years is an interesting number there because that's exactly the same amount of time as a tribulation period. That's why most people put this at the beginning of the tribulation and not any other place. Why would you be using the weapons for fuel after Jesus comes back?
Okay, so he has a second part to this question, so I'll just read it now since you're talking about it. But he says, which conflict results in the 7-year cleanup, contamination, destruction of Damascus, Ezekiel 38-39, Armageddon just prior to the millennium, or something else? I'm not completely clear on this one, so you can answer.
Well,
both
the cleanup that you're talking about is also in chapter 39, and it has to do with this battle specifically. And so further on down in verse 11, it says, it will come to pass in that day that I will give Gog a burial place there in Israel. Well, that's from this battle. And the valley of those who pass by east of the sea, and it will obstruct travelers, because there they will bury Gog and all his multitude. Therefore they will call it the valley of Ham and Gog. And it talks about a search party going out, and anytime a bone is found, you have these specific men that parties that go out, take up the bones, and they bury them downwind from the rest of Israel. And so that's telling in the sense that it looks like NBC stuff, nuclear, biological, chemical warfare type of stuff, because the bones themselves would be radioactive or chemically reactive, or biologically also. And so these guys will take and bury them in specific places. Well, it all has to do with that battle, and that's that cleanup is not going on for the full 7 years. It's going on for 7 months, specifically after that battle. But that's in the same context. And so I put the Ezekiel 38-39 battle at that point. When you're talking about the point of the battle being that God reveals himself to Israel, well, the fact that God's revealed himself to Israel doesn't mean that they're all saved on that day. What's going to take place is it's going to be plain to the people of Israel that God is still with them, and that he's really there, and that he's the one who saved them from this juggernaut that was coming down upon them. And again, it says, then they shall know that I am the Lord their God, who sent them into captivity among the nations, but also brought them back to their land and left none of them captive any longer. I will not hide my face from them anymore, for I shall have poured out my spirit on the house of Israel, says the Lord. Well, anytime that you're talking about people coming into a relationship with God, it's a process that they go through. And so this is the beginning of the process. God shows him exactly who he is. Then he pours his spirit out on the people of Israel. And the work of the Holy Spirit is to point to Christ. And by the time that you get to the end of the tribulation period, you have a whole group, 1/3 specifically, of the nation of Israel, according to the book of Zechariah. 1/3 of the nation of Israel that actually comes into a relationship with Christ. And so it's not all of them in the first place. But again, God is going to be using this stuff to turn them. You could see somebody recognizing, and again, when it talks about them recognizing the Lord here, it's you have a situation now in Israel where most of these people are atheists. They don't believe in God at all. And so at that point, they're going to recognize that the God of Israel is really the God of Israel. And then there's the issue of who is the Messiah. And so you could see people going through a process there. And so they recognize that God has done something for them. And you're going to have some of those people thinking that when the Antichrist comes in and brings in peace after World War III, that maybe he's the Messiah that the Bible talks about. But then he reveals himself to be exactly what he is, the Antichrist, at the midpoint. And then you see this major persecution of the Jews. And it's at that point that they're going to be recognizing that they've missed it with Jesus. And the last chapters of Zechariah specifically speak about that. And so they're going to recognize that Jesus is the Messiah, and they're going to come to him at that point.
So
It's kind of an overview.
since we're talking about Ezekiel 38 and 39, there's like this really, this is my opinion, but there's like this really weird calm before the storm where when you're talking about, the countries that the Bible talks about in times where you have Gog, Magog, as we assume is Russia, China being kings of the East, Iran, obviously Israel, Persia, Turkey, all that stuff. And I know like, Cold War type era, it was probably more intense as far as what Russia was doing and stuff. But there's just like this calm right now. The war on terror or whatever is over, so they say. And yet I've never seen in my lifetime the intensity of these countries moving into position where you have Russia and what he's doing with his natural resources, and they're flexing in our foreign policy as far as taking over the zones and areas that we're in. What China's doing, everyone always said, "Oh yeah, Kings of the East, they have a 2 million man army and stuff," but it was always 200 million man army. But it was always like the news headlines. They are now like strategically moving in their military and the economy. They're searching for natural resources because of the way the world's going, and it just seems like this quiet intensity that I've never seen before. And even them and Turkey talking together and stuff. Do you think that the ball is being moved forward like it never has before? Do you agree with what I'm saying, or do you think that it's of a pause right now?
Well, I think that when you look at all the nations that are listed in Ezekiel chapter 38, it's Turkey and Libya and Iran and Gomer, and what else do we have here? Yeah, Gomer and all its troops, House of Togarmah. So I pretty much named them all. In any case, when you look at all those nations, whether you're talking about Ethiopia or you're talking about Libya or you're talking about House of Togarmah, which is Turkey, or you're talking about Persia, you have all these inroads specifically with Russia. Russia's making inroads with Libya because we destroyed any kind of relationship that we could have with Libya by killing off Muammar Gaddafi. For what reason, I don't know. Because actually that was one of the things, when that took place, I was like, right before that took place, because when Muammar Gaddafi saw what we did to Saddam Hussein, that guy backed it all down. And he got rid of nukes, any nuclear programs, any chemical warfare programs. He backed it down, and I was like, wow, that's interesting, because that's going to put off this stuff. And then, we go in and strategically and diplomatically kill him. And now it's just a huge mess, and Russia's moved in there. And it's the same thing with Ethiopia and obviously these other nations. And so you have these alliances that are going on, many of the military that are taking place that are advancing that whole thing. So yes, I think that the ball's moving forward. And one of the things that you have with the Ezekiel 38 battle is it's a surprise attack.
So that's kind of the vibe. It's like we've never been seen as weak as we are now. And it's like their rhetoric, the things they're doing, they're laughing at us at the same time that they're strategically moving into place to do a surprise attack or to, go at it. And so it just feels like spiritually it's all.
Yeah. So the United States has to be out of the way. And so that can happen because we have a civil war. That's a possibility. It could happen because we have a change in our foreign policy, and that could happen, or it could happen because we're incompetent. And I think that's what's happening right now. And it could be any of these things. And there's other things that you could come up with too, including half of us get saved and the rapture happens.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Please, Jesus. But in any case, obviously the United States is moving out of the leadership position in the world.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to be, scripturally speaking. I don't like it. I hate it that it's happening in the way that it's happening, but that's the implications that you have from these passages, because we're not mentioned except in offhanded, and it's probably a diplomatic protest.
Yeah.
And so that's all we got. So
All right.
at that point,
So,
maybe we'll give her away the rest of our armaments.
I so dumb. I have family, that fought in the war on terror. Specifically on my dad's side, three brothers, Marines, and to watch Al Qaeda roll down the streets on CNN in our Humvees with their night vision on, with a 240 Bravo, their jaw dropped. They're just like, to say they're upset is like an understatement. To watch that go down, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, incompetence.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's so much going on. This is being recorded September 2021. You have COVID, you have the America situation, this liberty where we're trying to figure out stuff, the vaccines, the way they're pushing, trying to be a dad, a mom, what the job place looks like everything's turned upside down and stuff. But for Christians, what should our primary focus be as believers? Even we're living in these strange, distracting times. If you had to hone it down on, no matter what's going on, I should have my focus in this area, what would you tell Christians?
Well, first off, nothing's changed. The world changes, but the priorities that we have as Christians don't change. They're exactly the same. Mm-hmm. We just need to learn how to pivot and be able to do the things that God's called us to in the context of the world that we live in. And so the first thing that needs to be happening is I need to be close to Christ. I need to be somebody who's in love with Jesus. And so there's nothing more important than that. And so I have to have a walk with Jesus where I'm talking to him and he's talking to me, and I love him, and I recognize his work in my life, and I'm walking in obedience to him. And so that needs to happen. And then the second thing that needs to happen is I need to be salt and light to the world. And so, we're still in a situation where people need to know Jesus. The reason that this whole thing with vaccine mandates and all, and the situation with pitting one part of the populace against another part is working is because you have a bunch of people who are scared to death of dying, and they have every reason to be afraid, because if they die, they don't know what's going to happen to them, and they're afraid of, they're probably afraid of one of two things. Either they're going to cease to exist, and not many people actually believe that, or they're going to hell. And so this is the only life that they've got. And so you have people who will capitalize on that, including Satan, to try to keep them in fear and move them in certain directions. And so that's why this stuff works. The reason that this isn't a big deal to most Christians in the sense of, I've never been anti-vax. I've been a little worried about mRNA vaccines, but again, that's because I don't like medicine in the first place. But I've been vaccinated, more than most of you, because I was in a military family and overseas trips and that kind of stuff. But when COVID came along, I wasn't really worried about it. 99.8% chance of making it through was, I thought those were pretty good odds. And so I'm not too worried about it. I got COVID, and now I'm really not worried about it because I'm 27, times. Have you guys had it yet? Oh, well, doggone it. We're all in the same boat. Anyway, I'm 27 times more or less likely to get it than somebody who's been vaccinated. So we've got that from Israel studies. Interesting that Israel's doing all the interesting studies on these things. In any case, I know where I'm going, and so even when I had it and I was in the hospital and I was like, sitting there in bed and I'm like, you want to take me this way? I'm good with it. I wouldn't have minded going home to be with the Lord. And God didn't have that for me. And so cool. In any case, most people don't live that way. They live in fear, and Satan drives them like cattle. And that's really the problem that we've got in our world. And we've got the answer. And the answer is a relationship with Christ. You don't have to fear death anymore. And you don't have to fear life anymore. Jesus is with you, and he works in you, and he makes you like him. You don't have to fear your own failures anymore. There are a lot of things that people fear. And so we've got the answer. And so in the midst of all this stuff, again, I'm getting sick of certain types of politicians. And I'm just like you in all of that, and maybe a little bit more rowdy with that. But I'm getting sick of them because they're just wicked. And so I can make those kinds of statements, but that doesn't change the fact that I want to be a witness. And if I was sitting in front of Nancy Pelosi, my go-to move would not to be rebuke her for all the junk that she's done necessarily. I would be talking to her about Jesus first, and then if she got snotty with me, then we'd have a talk. But people need Jesus, and so the reason that these people are like they are is because they need Jesus. Jesus said that I'm to do business until he comes, and the business that we're to be about is sharing the love of the Lord with the people who are around us, not the politicians, because you're not going to know them. You're not going to be around. I'm never going to talk to Nancy Pelosi, most likely. And so it's the people who are around you. And we change hearts one person at a time. And that's what we're supposed to be about. And so, and then obviously taking care of my family and that kind of thing. And there's balance to all that stuff. Family does not trump Jesus, right? And it's important, but it doesn't trump Jesus. And, the same thing, we balance family with our witness on this earth, that kind of thing. We're not in a place where they're trying to kill us for being Christians. People in Afghanistan are.
Yep.
Yeah. But we're not in that place. And so, there's things going on in people's business situations. They're threatening to fire people and that kind of stuff. And that's fear, once again. They're using fear to drive people in certain directions. And so if you don't do what I say, then you're going to get fired and your family's going to starve. And, those are all the implications of it. You're not going to get unemployment, and nobody's going to take care of you, and blah, blah, blah. And that's where the world sits. And if they think that what where their paycheck comes from the boss, and that the only way that they're going to feed their family is if they have a job, if they think that, then that's going to force them to move in certain directions. And these people know that that's exactly the situation. They want you to do certain things, and so they're going to drive you that way. But if you understand that my boss doesn't feed me, the Lord feeds me, and the Lord is the one who takes care of my family, then you're free to make biblical stands in situations that the unbelievers are not. I don't live my life by fear. And so, again, I just keep all those things in mind. I want to live a principled life, and the things that I do, whether you get the vaccine or you don't get the vaccine, that's a principled choice. You need to be praying about those things and that kind of stuff. And you're just not driven by fear. And so we've got stuff that people in the world don't have and they need. And so I need to be a good witness of who Jesus is. Some of that witness is going to be the stands that people make in the situations that are going to come up. And, not a lot of people on this planet that are willing to make stands that cost them something. And the ones that do are notable. And I think that we're supposed to be notable.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
All right, we're out of time. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. We appreciate it.
God bless you.
We like answering Bible questions with you and fellowship with you. If you're looking for a church, we'd love to have you. I talked about at the beginning of the program. We have 3 services on Sunday morning, 7:30, 9:15, and 11. The second and third service is currently in our outdoor amphitheater, just so you know. We also have a Wednesday and a Sunday night service. Pastor Steve's going through the book of John on Wednesday night. So if you guys want to come on out tonight, 6:30, we'd love to have you. If not, we'll see you guys next week, Wednesday at 3:30. True Set Free. You guys can email crosswalkradio@gmail.com or text me at I just messed this up, sorry. 707-872-7677. That's all I got. God bless you guys.